Okay, thank you, Hasan, for joining us today. It's a big week for SANDAG, and we'll be talking about the regional plan. You just celebrated your third year anniversary, so you've had a few years to get your feet wet and to get this plan off the ground. A lot of questions to get to. Do you have anything off the top you want to say to set the table?
Yeah, well, first of all, it's good to be with you. I actually spoke to this board just when I started, and you know, it's really very fitting that I'm speaking to you after all the things we talked about, and today is like a day in review, you know. So I'm looking forward to this conversation.
What we've all up to speed on the plan, maybe not all of its nuances and intricacies, but you know, 2 years ago you said you had this idea, and we've editorialized a couple times saying let's wait to see what the plan is before we judge it. Now the plan is here, and you have some of the members that you think might support it who are judging it and saying that the mileage tax in particular is a bridge too far. What talk to us a little bit about the politics of this before we get into the details.
Sure. So as I said some years ago to all of you, I said we are going to develop a vision, but we're going to create a public policy debate like no other. And that public policy debate doesn't mean that you know, everyone is going to either support it or oppose it. But you would agree that we are creating that public policy debate. We have a vision that's, I believe it's, you know, while people want to focus on the taxes, it is a vision about reimagining the future of transportation in San Diego. It's not about taxing people, but about giving people choices. Yes, it's expensive, $160 billion over 30 years. And many of your reporters wrote many articles. Expensive, no question about it. But if you ask me, I would say it's more expensive not to do it. And for those who, you know, are trying to say that, you know, I don't like the mileage fee or what we call it, the road user charge, fine. I don't like it either. But we have a financial plan which we're required to do by federal laws that said if you want to submit a plan for approval, it has to be what they call financially constrained, meaning the plan has to identify reasonable measures to pay for it. So in the plan, there is the road user charge, there is sales taxes, there is toll revenues, all of that is reasonably expected. Now, that doesn't mean that tomorrow we're going to do a road user charge. Doesn't mean that SANDAG board or myself or my team can impose any taxes, period. This is eventually going to have to be up to San Diego, the 3.3 million of them. And so I understand our leaders are saying we don't like the road user charge, fine. But at the end of the day, you need to have a plan and you need to identify how you're going to pay for it. And frankly, if this plan is worth something to San Diegans, I'm optimistic about the fact that they will come around. The voters in LA, yes, granted LA is more maybe liberal than San Diego, did in a big way and said we're going to pay for it. And sometimes 80% of them, not because they all feel they're going to use the system they're building, but they all felt we need to provide choices. I am an optimist. I think this will happen here. But this does not change the fact that we outline a vision that's not highway fighting with transit, but a system with different strategies that give people choices, that actually clean our air, reduces greenhouse gas emission in a significant way, and at the end of the day, respond to a region that we think is a great region. This is a beautiful place, beautiful beaches, great landmarks, a great economic future, and I think the infrastructure goes with it. So the plan clearly said we need to have a central mobility hub in San Diego. We're still deciding where that is. Is it at Navor? Is it in downtown? Is it at the port facility? We started the environmental process. We passed a bill, the first of its kind in San Diego for CEQA streamlining. The plan said we're going to build the third, one of the largest west of the hemisphere border crossing. We're hoping to open this facility September 2024. The plan said we're going to move the track off the bluff, so they won't keep fixing it and interrupting services there. The plan said we're going to build the kind of transit system that respond to people's need, not a transit system that goes by the beach or by the airport, but goes to the beach and to the airport. And yes, it is more expensive, but if you don't do it right, in my view, you're wasting your money. We just opened.
I'm sorry.
Yes, go ahead.
Well, so if Todd Gloria represents a big chunk of the vote at SANDAG, and other mayors are saying they don't want the mileage fee, the road user charge, do you change that plan before the vote, or do you just go all in with your chips?
Yeah, that's a great question, Matt. We can't change the plan. I mean, for me to change the plan, I have to put it out, do the environmental work, recirculate. That will take 6 to 9 months. So the plan will go to the board on Friday as presented. Now, I did this publicly. I said this publicly, and I say it again. When we put the financial plan together, we didn't have the national stimulus of 1.2 trillion. I think SANDAG and San Diego will do really well in that stimulus. Does that mean we need this local resources? Maybe. We'll analyze that. And to Mayor Gloria's point, we're absolutely going to look at the financials as we move forward in the next months or years and adjust the plan accordingly. But the plan that goes to the board next week cannot be changed.
Well, so given the timeline, you need to do this by year's end. Your expectation that the board will swallow and say, we'll figure that out on the back end and vote to approve it? Or what if they don't?
I think, Matt, I told you this when I met with you a while back. I don't count votes, even though many people said, how could that be? I mean, first of all, you try to count votes, you most of the time you find yourself wrong. Will the board go with it? I hope so. That's my hope. If the board doesn't go with it, then that means they're okay with the region being out of compliance with federal and state for 6 to 9 months, and okay with losing hundreds of millions of dollars from the federal and state governments. I don't think that's where they are. I think they're the leaders who's going to see through this. Now, can the board direct staff to start looking at the financial and come back to them? Absolutely. But the point is, the plan has to be intact now, giving all the legal requirement. And I agree with Mayor Gloria, and I agree with others who said, the road user charge is a difficult thing we might look at. We will look at it. But I also want to remind your readers of something, that the road user charge is not just about the money. Let us say we can come up with another financial plan with another source of revenues to overcome the money that comes from road user charge. But also it is about the effectiveness of greenhouse gas emission, travel behavior. And that doesn't mean that you do the charge to make it difficult for people to drive. No, you do the charge so when people drive, and especially if you have other choices, you think of your choices. Therefore, it's more than just the financial. It's the greenhouse gas emission. It's whether the plan meets the 19% greenhouse gas emission per capita reduction that we're required to meet by state law. If the plan does, the financial, I think, can work through. But we don't know that yet. That needs time to analyze and figure out.
Let me ask you a big picture question. I'm sure you're expecting this, the trust issue with SANDAG, which has, you came into an organization in complete disarray. Now there's 3 sales tax measures as part of your plan. That's 3 separate chances for the public to tell you to pound sand. Do you fear that? What's your plan? I mean, I was driving on the freeway the other day and I saw a bus with an ad for the SANDAG regional plans. They're already trying to get the word out, but are you optimistic that people trust SANDAG?
I am optimistic. I agreed with you back then, 2 years ago, when you told me I'm coming into an agency with some credibility. So I agree, and I own that. I no longer can say it's not my fault. I own everything that goes good or bad in this agency. But I can tell you this, that SANDAG as an agency has delivered, sorry, has delivered the largest infrastructure project, the midcourse, on time, on budget. People should know that a $2.2 billion to come on time, on budget. In my career, I've been part of big projects. All my career, I have never seen a project of this size come on time, on budget. So people should trust that. They also should trust that from day one, we have been putting everything on the table. And oftentimes, it's not pleasant to hear the kind of criticism, but we thought the public deserved to know, needs to know. We debated the difficult issues. We didn't hide it. We didn't massage it. Just reminding your readers that this road user charge was in the plan before, the plan that was adopted before, but maybe not the kind of public policy debate that goes with it. We've been about the truth and honesty to the public that I think the public will trust us. So I am optimistic, Matt, that the public will come around. I mean, LA didn't succeed the first couple of times they went to the voters, but they succeed 4 times after that because they were able to tell their story. And I'm glad you saw on the bus, I call it the outreach to the public. The public deserves to know about our plan. The public deserves to know that's going to cost them money. The public deserves to know that it's going to provide them choices. So I'm optimistic. I believe the agency have gone a long way. We're not there yet completely, but gone a long way in establishing that the only thing that's going to guide us is data and the truth and information. And the politics can play itself. You know, I mean, I faced this kind of politics from day one. I never had a boring board meeting because I believe the public deserve to know all these things, and we're doing it. So I'm optimistic.
If SANDAG's representation is that it's being candid with San Diego County residents about this plan is a serious claim, then how can you guys not learn the lessons of the state high-speed rail project? In 2008, California voters narrowly approved a high-speed rail project. Almost instantly, state planners gave up on the idea of having a high-speed rail go through the Silicon Valley because of objections from the cities and from wealthy homeowners. And yet your project starts in Solana Beach and Encinitas. Why do you presume you'll have any more success than Silicon Valley did in getting them to accept the disruption of a new high-speed rail line? And what's worse is that when the state dropped its plans to have high-speed rail through Silicon Valley, just have conventional rail, they then moved to the Central Valley, where presumably these objections would be less. And they've made very little progress in the Central Valley because no one wants to sell their land. So I just feel like it's like this amazing degree of disinformation going on here. If you guys presume not to learn from what the state faced, the state gave up on high-speed rail in Silicon Valley because of the objections from rich homeowners. Why do you presume that you won't face the exact same objections from Solana Beach and Encinitas?
I will thank you, Chris, and good to see you. I will agree with you on when we went to the voters for high-speed rail, and what happened after is not a story that anybody should be proud of. But we're not talking about empty promises here. We're not talking about things that politically motivated. We're talking about data-driven approaches. So you're talking about, well, Solana Beach and Encinitas might not like something like maybe moving the track of the bluff, or they're not like a commuter rail line that link jobs to people. While the midcourse is a great project, I think it's going to take a lot of vehicle trips off the freeway, but not enough. So if they're not going to like that just because of the politics, one thing. But if it is about whether they can trust an agency to build this project, I think we demonstrated we can. We just delivered the midcourse last week. And the midcourse is a big project, the largest infrastructure project in San Diego's history, was delivered on time and budget. So we're by no means, somebody could say the high-speed rail got screwed up, therefore we shouldn't trust. I would like people to judge us based on what we're putting out and based on what we have done in the past. We built the I-15 high occupancy toll lanes. We finished the midcourse. Very soon we're going to open the border crossing. So we're demonstrating that we can deliver, Chris, unlike the high-speed rail discussion. Now, why should they trust that the pay money into this? Obviously, they're going to be the final decision makers, the people. And if they don't see a tangible benefit, they shouldn't. But if they see a tangible benefit, they will, like they did in other regions. So I am back to, yes, high-speed rail didn't go the way it should have, would have. It's a bad example. But everything we said in the plan was driven by data and information. Everything we said we're going to do, the public knows about it clearly, knows how much it's going to cost, what kind of time frame we're talking about, etc. So I appreciate and I agree with you on the high-speed rail aspect, but we're talking about a data-driven plan here. And by the way, it's not all about fixed guideway system. This plan is about a system. This is about making the complete corridor in every corridor in Santiago. This is about flexible fleet. We just put out a request for innovative concept just November 1st to ask the private industry to tell us how we connect the landmarks in Santiago, a 15 miles of tunnel within downtown. So if you're coming to Santiago International, you're a tourist, you can get from your plane into an underground system that gets you to the beautiful beaches, SeaWorld, Petco Park, Balboa Park. So we're very clear in where we want to go on, and we have the information to do it. Again, we're not the final say in who pays for it. That's the people of Santiago.
But the problem with the framing of the issue that you just offered is the suggestion that it failed, high-speed rail failed in Silicon Valley because of the optics. No, it failed because rich people did not want their lives disrupted. So why do you think rich people will not want their lives disrupted in North County? I seriously, where is the candor from SANDAG about the fact that rich people don't want their lives disrupted and a high-speed train will disrupt their lives?
Okay, so Chris, if you think that we're gonna sit here and just say we can't do this because rich people don't want it, I don't think we will be doing our jobs. I think we put a vision in front of Sandiagans that we think it works for San Diego, and some rich people might like it, some poor people might not like it. But the bottom line is, we believe a vision that's good for the county. And contrary to, as a matter of fact, tonight we're meeting with business leaders here in San Diego. My message to them is, you need to own this. It is not me who's gonna decide whether this goes forward. It is not only the civic leadership, it is how we put this out. Is this important for the future and sustainability of this region? Economic and otherwise, environmental and otherwise. And at the end of the day, I don't think you would agree, Chris, that we're not going to sit here and say, we're not going to do this. We're not going to talk about this because rich people might not like it. We're putting it on the table. And the board have every right to say nay to it or yay, and we'll see. And what's happening right now is, I believe, a healthy public policy debate, not only of how to pay for it, but what it means. And it means is a system that works together, have flexibility, anticipate technology. Most of it will have to be app operated. So it's not the system of the past, it's the system of the future. But we don't do our planning based on what rich people might feel. And you might disagree with that. You say, well, at the end of the day, they're going to decide. I don't think so. I don't think rich people around the country have objected to many of the ideas that were built in their regions, including Los Angeles. Los Angeles has a lot of rich people. Los Angeles voters, are giving $120 billion every 30 years to build the system. I hope San Diegans will see the tangible benefits and do the same.
Can I bring up another line of? Oh, go ahead, Chris.
Matt, can I jump in? Because I think that this is an important point I want to clarify for Chris. And Hasan, you tell me if I'm wrong, but I believe the high-speed plan goes along the current low-SAN alignment.
Correct. That's
so
correct.
The tracks are already there. The real question is, will Solana Beach, etc., will they take density around the new stations to make it work. Not will they oppose the actual construction of the line. If anything, they want to move those tracks off the Del Mar block, I think.
As a matter, you're absolutely right. It's in the existing corridor, but I think what Chris referring to was moving the 1.5 mile of tracks from the beach inland and tunneling under these communities. And I think they're asking for it. I think the biggest proponent of moving the track are Del Mar and Solana Beach. So you're absolutely right, Joshua.
But to clarify, Silicon Valley had the same thing. They were going to build the high-speed rail on the existing lines. And the rich people, the rich homeowners, and their politicians said, no way, that's still going to disrupt our lives and we don't want it. So that's not true that this is just about building new lines. It's about the disruption caused by a major construction project. And I also want to just point out several things. As Joshua reported a couple of years ago, transit is in decline across America. People do not want to get out of their cars. As many people have pointed out, California is not New York City. It is not dense. People do not want to get out of their cars. Joe Biden's proposed having 500,000 electric vehicle stations being built across America. San Diego's 1% of America. So why not have 5,000 electric vehicle stations built here and assume that's where the future is, as opposed to presuming that people will use transit when history shows a declining interest in transit?
Chris, I don't disagree about the decline in transit nationwide, because we never really built transit for choice riders. We always built transit for transit dependent, and including here in San Diego. I have no doubt in my mind, if we build the right transit, more people will take it. That doesn't mean that we're all going to leave our cars in the garages. To your second point, absolutely, we're actually probably the most innovative agency in the country when it comes to future electric car infrastructure. We got grants. We're working with we got more grants in the last couple of years than in our history, because we're looking at electric infrastructure charging. We're working with the big manufacturers like Ford and others about smart mobility. So we are looking at all of this, but I don't buy the argument that people won't take transit if you really truly design it right for the choice riders. I lived in 30 miles when I was in LA from my job, and I took Metrolink for 7 years, not because I wanted to take Metrolink, because it's much, much better choice than driving. So I think we need to build the transit for choice riders in San Diego, and I believe we're doing that in this vision. And I think many more of us will take it. That doesn't mean all of us is going to leave the cars in the garage.
Can you tell me how this plan would solve two issues people raise? One is equity issues, and that the taxes would be regressive, and the people least inclined to pay into the system are the ones that are going to hit hardest. And also, how do you solve the final mile issue? If I live at the top of a hill, a mile away from a transit station, how am I supposed to get to and from it when they're actually building apartments on the parking lots that used to be at those transit stations?
Andrew, thank you. And the social equity issue, that's an important issue for us. I went to the board last January. They adopted an equity statement. I reminded the board, and it's here in my wall, I reminded the board that a statement is a statement. You need to follow it with action. Last month, I asked the board for a pilot, $11 million pilot, partnering with the County of San Diego to have a free youth transit pass, 18 and under, starting in March of this year. We also made it clear that the sins of the past that transportation did by dividing communities and doing the shiny objects in certain communities and ignoring others is no longer even contemplated, from the standpoint that we always said we understand, but it's no longer enough. We need to go beyond that. So I believe you mentioned the regressivity in taxes. Sales taxes, you pay sales tax, and if you're a rich person buying a shirt for $10, you pay sales tax on that. If you're a poor person and you buy a $10, you pay sales taxes on that. But as a percent of your income, there's now been no comparison. So the nature of our taxes has been regressive, even gas taxes. Who's most likely to drive longer distances to get to their destination? Those who live further, they cannot afford houses where they need to be. Therefore, the gas tax is regressive in nature. I think in the road user charge discussion, this has absolutely to be taken into account. I don't think any tax should penalize those low income or minorities because of the way things are. So I am with you on the regressivity of the taxes, and any new form of taxes have to take social equity as a top priority. The technology is there to figure that out. So the fact that if you're going to say a form of charges, you could always figure out a way to make sure that you're not hurting the very poor during that. So the regressive taxes has been there for a long time, and I think it has to be addressed finally. And social justice and social equity in transportation has risen to the top in this plan and will continue to be a top priority for me, at least, to recommend to the board they do things right.
And to the final mile question?
This is frankly where I think people are not getting one of the most important aspects of these 5 big moves, we call them, the 5 strategies. One of them is the flexible fleet. And the flexible fleet is all about the first and last mile. Flexible fleet is app operated like Uber or Lyft system that's going to be available to you when you need it. So it gets you to your transit station or within short distances if you want to. And all these mobility hubs as part of the strategy, and the flexible fleet is actually designed after the first and last mile. And these solutions are going to be technology driven. So that's why I think this vision, while yes, it's expensive, but it's comprehensive from the standpoint, we're not just talking about things, we're saying this is how it's going to work. And so the flexible fleet is going to resolve the first and last mile issue. And again, Andrew, just reminding you, we're not expecting 90% of us to take transit. We're saying we have about 3% now, and if we go to 10, 11%, that will be a great success. And for that, we have to fix the first and last mile issue. And I believe this vision outlined this very clearly. The last thing I would say, if you want to build transit for choice riders, the right transit, you don't worry about whether rich people is going to oppose to it going through their neighborhood, or whether we can't go there because we don't have the right of way. You can do it underground. You can do it above ground. And this way you guarantee that your transit goes to the beach, not by the beach, or you guarantee that your transit goes to the airport, not by the airport. That is the only way transit is going to work, is to attract choice rider and compete with the automobile.
So I have a question about commuting. We're talking a lot about these plans serving commuters, people getting to and from work, but I can see that after the pandemic that the future of commuting is a bit up in the air with more people working from home. So how are you guys accounting for that with these new plans?
Great question, Bella. And you know, I wish we know how this other side of COVID-19 looks like. Nobody knows. I can tell you that our life has changed in a way that I have, at least in 35 years living in Southern California, never experienced such a period of uncertainty and not knowing where we're going to be, and you know, whether another variant is going to come up and disrupt us again, et cetera, et cetera. So the question is, do we formulate public policy based on this period of COVID? And the answer is, it's not advisable. And when I teach at the universities, I tell the kids, do not make public policy decisions just based on a period like COVID. There will be a mistake, actually. Now, yes, there's more people working from home, for sure, right now. But if you believe the traffic counts from Caltrans, we're actually above the traffic pre-COVID now. So while COVID has maybe spread the peak or eliminated the morning and evening peak, the travel overall has increased. Second, there's many surveys, including one of our own, that says people on average who telecommute tend to drive more. So the question is, do we design a different system for a different time period? The bottom line is people will continue to go to destinations, even if they're not going to the workplace. You might eliminate the commute trip, but all the other trip is going to have to take place. Finally, I would say, yes, I would hope that more of us will continue to telecommute after this pandemic, but nobody knows that model. I mean, since the 80s, people were saying, oh my gosh, since they discovered the fax machine, they said, oh my gosh, nobody's going to travel anymore. We don't know what this will be. It's really be short-sighted to formulate public policy based on this period, but you're absolutely right. Our travel pattern is going to change. Our need for travel might actually increase, but the pattern is going to change. And we believe the vision we have, the flexibility of the vision we have, it has transit for where jobs and people need to be connected. And like Andrew mentioned, it has flexibility where your fixed guideway transit will not do it, to bring you from up the hill to the transit station or to take you to places. I think we need to have places within our communities for people to be safely walking and biking if they want to. Biking is not going to eliminate the congestion, but biking is a good character for a community to have, but it has to be safe. So I think, Bella, the issue of COVID definitely impacted our lives in more ways than one. Nobody really knows where it's going to end up being, but the need for travel seems to be there, and actually more than it was pre-COVID.
Do you have the numbers? It's interesting to hear that travel is up pre-pandemic.
Yeah, I think the numbers, we can get you the numbers for sure, but in some cases it's 105% of what it was. Some cases it's where it was in terms of travel, in terms of trips. But you probably don't see the same congestion in the peak yet. Well, I see it now and lately, but you won't see it right in the peak, but it's spread out. People are traveling more for sure. And this is not only here in San Diego, everywhere, in Los Angeles, everywhere. Maybe people get sick of staying at home. They're just traveling everywhere. And in terms of the surveys, yeah, there is surveys not conclusive yet that people who telecommute tend to drive more vehicle mile travel than not. They eliminated the commute trip, but dropping children to the child care and going to the store, etc., is still there. But we'll get you some data.
That'd be great. I mean, a follow-up on that kind of ties some of these themes together and maybe argues against a big transportation plan, right? The cost of batteries is going to go down as those become better. San Diego's a hub for that right now. Commuting patterns are a big question mark. And eventually, you know, there's going to be more electric cars, more charging stations. So that will be more common, and B, more prevalent for more people. So I guess my question is, there's not appetite among many people for a road tax, but one of the things that would do is disincentivize people from driving. Without that as a disincentive, why spend all this money on transit plans when people are just going to have cheaper, better cars that don't pollute? I mean, why isn't that the future of transit?
Well, great. And by the way, the future of transit or cars, that we all want to have cars and buses that don't pollute. And I think we will, I think, eventually electrify the system. How long it's going to take, that's still being debatable. How long the conversion of the fleet is going to be to electric? Do we have the infrastructure? Is it going to be a disruptive change like the cell phone? And I think we're all going to be driving electric car, but that's more reason why the road user charge should be there. If we all drove electric cars, we won't have a penny to maintain our road system, because the gas tax would not be there. So a form of tax, a user fee, has to be there. And that's why I believe we're in the rights to do this. Now, would people pay for a transit system that they are getting used to? A transit is for the poor people. Would we ever built a system for choice riders, like in San Francisco and BART, or like in New York. And yes, granted, we don't have the densities of New York or San Francisco. And I believe in some cases we will. I mean, right now we open the midcourse. The ridership is increasing 20% every day since it opened, because that's going to provide a one-seat ride from the border to the university. So there is a market, not everywhere, but in some cases there is a market for that transit. And I believe San Diego is going to see that. I believe the new line that we're going to start environmentally clearing soon, we call the purple line, we call it the workers line, which is going to bring people from the border through National City, Chula Vista, Kearny Mesa to UTC and beyond. That line will definitely be used regardless of the model that we're operating under in the future. But I agree with that. Transit is not going to work everywhere. Maybe flexible fleet is a better way to go. Maybe the high occupancy toll lanes that we propose is a good idea. Not only it allows rapid and carpoolers to go in it, but it also manages congestion. You know, it incentivizes people if they don't have to, not to. I mean, sometimes this pricing, you'll still continue to need to drive if you have to, but you might think twice about doing 2-3 trips when you can do everything in one trip. So this is about managing congestion. I believe this vision is from the standpoint not only managing congestion, but building the system of the future, the flexible system. And I wouldn't call transit is all about fixed guideway system like the midcourse and the big project. Transit is also the flexible fleet. Transit is also the feeder system. Transit is also the Uber and Lyft app-operated models that we're talking about. And this is what's unique about this vision. It's data-driven, it's future mobility, but it's also not, you know, we're not going with the crazy ideas. We're going with ideas that we think is going to work for San Diego.
Another issue that's been raised by more than a few of our letter writers is safety issues. There's on many occasions you'll show up at a station. There's no police there. There's no enforcement people there, or on some occasions people will be camping out with tents on the platforms. Is there going to be money in this to make sure that this is safe? Because how are you going to encourage choice riders that this is a safe way to commute?
Andrew, I said this before, unless you factor all of this in, you're not going to have choice rider come ride transit, period. If you don't have bathrooms in stations, if you don't have frequency in services, if you don't have people feeling safe and secure, they will never ride it. It doesn't matter how much you push them and how expensive you make it. But this is the whole idea, that the 200-mile of commuter rail system we propose, mostly underground, is first connecting jobs to people. Second, making it so that it is for choice riders, not only for transit dependent. It's unfortunate, but everything we've done so far in this region, it's always thinking, if you don't have access to automobile, you're transit dependent, you will live with it. You're okay for a trip that takes 2 hours when it takes 20 minutes in the car. That's how we've been thinking. And now we're saying in this vision, no. It's going to take you probably, hopefully, less time if you decide to take that line than if you drove. And if it's not a fixed guideway system, it could be a flexible fleet. Many of us maybe will own vehicles, but we wouldn't have to own 3 vehicles if we can have access to another vehicle like the open and Lyft model. So this whole dynamic is changing, but unless we start thinking about security and safety and convenience, we're not going to get choice riders.
This plan doesn't just start from square one. It kind of builds on Transnet. And so one of the issues you have is that the Transnet projects that were promised aren't even, you know, a lot of those are never going to be built. So what do you say to folks who say, well, let's build those first Are those just dated projects? Is that your argument, or what? How do you kind of finesse that for the public?
Yeah. So Matthew, from day one, actually the first week I was here, I talked to the board and I apologized for the misinformation that put about Transnet. Originally, we're talking here about 2019 dollars. We said we're going to bring in $16 billion, when in fact you're going to bring in $9 billion. So you lost 40% of your revenues just simply because the forecast was not correct. Second, in the old forecast, we said 4.4 million people will be here in San Diego by 2050. Well, no, it's going to be 3.5, maybe a 3.6, not 4.4. So that forecast relied on a greater number of people being in San Diego. So I hope people understand that we didn't hide this. And we didn't hide behind, oh, this is in the past. We said we own it, we made a mistake, and we need to move on. Now, losing 40% of the revenues means that 40% at least of the money that were to be spent on this project are not there. That's number one. Number two, one would question whether a project that was identified in 1987 is still a project that should be built in 2021. If people think that you're going to get rid of congestion by adding lanes, this has been proven again and again that doesn't work. It just simply does not work. You feel good for a few months. Houston built a 26-lane highway, became one of the most congested in Houston. So I don't think some of these projects make sense from planning, engineering, from an effectiveness standpoint, period. I know some of you might disagree with this. Some of you might think, well, just add lanes and let us go on. It doesn't work that way. Therefore, yes, the voters in San Diego deserve to know that the forecast hijacked the the estimates. One, and number two, they also need to know that some of these projects no longer work for this time period. And so that's why we're going to our board actually with a major ordinance amendment in February, March to amend the amendment to take some of these projects out, because it's not fair to keep San Diegans thinking that they're going to get this. They're not. One, there's no money, and two, some of these projects are no longer the project that you should be building.
Thank you. I can keep going if not, but I want to give board members a chance. I don't want to hog the mic.
Go ahead, I'm all yours.
How about the 3 tax hikes? What in the end, what's the additional bill for a typical San Diegan? Assuming that
I'm sorry, say that again. Matthew,
assuming
sorry.
all 3 of these sales tax hikes go into are approved, what would be the average increased bill for a homeowner? For a shopper.
Yeah, I can give you the exact number, but the road user charge plus the sales tax, I mean, they were an estimate of, I'm not sure about the number, but it will be a few hundreds for per year per household, and I'll get you the exact number. Here's the question, and I don't want to minimize this by saying that it is a lot of money for a lot of people. I agree, and like Andrew mentioned, the regressivity of taxes has to be taken into account every time you do this. If you take the pandemic as, for example, which part of the society where still have to commute to work? Is this first responders, the essential workers, the store workers, and these are not people who make a lot of money. So do we want a system that will continue to penalize these people from a social? Of course not. So we have to figure that out. But whatever the amount is, it's not going to be, cheapen the total of 160 billion over 30 years. But I believe very strongly the return on investment is much higher than that. And if some of us is willing to pay $100 or $200 a year toward that system, I think that's an investment in the future of our kids and grandkids. I don't doubt that for a second. Now, will that be too much money for some? Absolutely. And do we have to figure out how do we put a system forth that does not end up penalizing the very poor and the very low income? We should. Is the technology there to do that? Yes. But again, Matthew, I'm not the one who's gonna, require. I don't have the authority to ask people to pay taxes. My board doesn't have the authority. My board has the authority to put it in front of the voters. Am I optimistic that the voters in San Diego will eventually come and pay for it? Yes, absolutely. Because I remember the discussion I had when I was in LA. I remember the very discussion like this one. Why should people say, why would the rich people agree with this? Why? But most people came with not just simple majority, with like 70% of the voters. And the 70% of the voter weren't the poor people. Many of them were the rich people that said, maybe we do have to provide choices. I believe the same thing will happen in San Diego.
Oh, but it's not just a transportation ballot measure or three that will be on votes in coming years. There's going to be affordable housing measures,
sure.
This, that, and the other, local measures, school funding measures, and those measures have been on hold during COVID. And so there's going to be like this,
right.
People are going to be like tapping maple trees and sticking their little spigots in there. A lot of people are going to be told no.
I agree. There will be other needs, other measures, and I totally think that at one point people's going to probably be tired and sick and tired of hearing, pay for this, for that. But that's our goal. Let us make it tangible to people, so that either say yay or nay. And if they say yay, great. If they say nay, fine. That's their choice. But I think our job is to make sure that vision is tangible to them. That it's a data-driven. It's not driven by politics. I can tell you, Matthew, if I were to put this plan with the politics, I will have no plan. I will have a plan of no value. And if I'm going to respond to, somebody saying the politics is not there for road user charge, or the politics is not there for transit, or the politics is not there for high occupancy toll lanes, the politics is not there for flexible fleet, I will have no plan, because I have probably 30 different opinions in my board of how to do this. That is why I am proud. My team and I put a plan based what the data took us. And at the end of the day, up to the board whether they move it next week or not.
There's your idea of a Grand Central Station and is apparently changing. You're thinking of different locations. What is it that led to that?
It's not changing. I think San Diego will have a Grand Central central mobility hub, and will be a great one, and will be needed one. And connecting that Grand Central to the airport, and getting all the existing transit and future transit. What is right now, we're in the environmental process, and we're looking at alternatives. The Navwar is our preferred alternative as it stands today. We're looking at two other alternatives, one in downtown San Diego and one at the port facilities. And whatever this alternative does, if we have to adjust the notice of preparation for the environmental to reflect that, we will. But for now, nothing changes. We're going to have a central mobility hub and a Grand Central.
So what is your preference? I was unclear from the news stories whether what you just said is that Navwar is still my top priority, or my top desire, or is it one of the other two you've mentioned?
No, I think any of them will accomplish the goal of having a connection to the airport central mobility. I want something that works and that doesn't take another 5 years of discussion. I wanna cut the ground in 2 years. I don't have the luxury of time. I don't wanna talk about fantasy land. I wanna build things. And so I think we're gonna have to make a decision soon as a region, which one get us to cutting ground in 2 years. And if that happened to be NAVWAR, great, because I think it's a great opportunity to work with our partners from the Navy and redevelop the Midway. If that happened not to be NAVWAR, then we're looking at that. But Matthew, my guide here is, we've been at this for 2 years now. We signed the first memorandum of understanding with the Navy almost 2 years ago. And we spent significant amount of funding studying, engineering, environmental. We did a bill in Sacramento. And I'm not about to recommend to the board we go another 2 years of discussion. It's time to make decision. I mean, every time you don't like the answer, when you study, you do another study. That's not what I'm about. So I think a factor will be time. I think this region deserves to have a central mobility hub very soon. And so that will factor in. But that decision is not going to have to wait long. In the next couple of months, we're going to decide whether NAVWAR will stay the preferred alternative like it is right now, or will something else. Time will tell, but that's a short time.
Yeah, I was reading between the lines. It seemed to me that this is a negotiation ploy because the Navy is moving slowly. Is that?
It could. Look, Matthew, I appreciate working with the Navy. I mean, we're a proud military town, and we'll always be. That's not going to change. But I also, just to be very frank, like I said in what you read, I think we need to move faster. We don't have all the time. You know, I'm an old guy. You know, I'm 62 years old, and I came to town to make things happen. And I am happy where we are. You know, we finished the midcourse on budget. I give the credit to all the people before me for the midcourse. But the 4.5 years of construction, I was here for 3 years. We finished the midcourse. We're about to deliver Otay 2. We started the Lausanne discussion, and I want to definitely, before I leave town, I want to make sure the Central Mobility Hub is cutting ground somewhere. So I don't have the luxury of time to keep pushing it for next year. Granted that COVID have disrupted things. You know, I mean, COVID changed our life of ways that we will never understand probably. But COVID have disrupted the progress, but still, we need to keep moving on.
You mentioned a timeline. What is your timeline? Like how much longer? You said you're 62.
I would like, yeah.
And I'm not talking about the SANDAG timeline, but your personal. This is a lot of people are saying.
Yeah, my personal
plan.
timeline. I'd like to ground be cut within 2 to 3 years on the Central Mobility Hub. Now, I'm not gonna say that when I'm gonna leave town. I work at the pleasure of the board. If they can fire me anytime they want to. I'm at a stage in my career where I'm really enjoying this because I have an amazing team here. We're trying to put a vision that I believe reimagine the future of transportation. And the minute I think that's not happening, I will definitely skip town. But I wanna make sure this vision goes to the board next Friday. I wanna make sure we deliver Otay 2. I wanna make sure we move in the environmental and design for the bluff. I wanna make sure the Central Mobility Hub cuts ground in the next few years. If this is passed beyond 2 to 3 years, I don't think that will be interesting for me or anybody of my team, and I don't think I will be, and if I will not consider myself effective staying around if these things don't move as fast as I want them to.
What is your vision for the percentage, generally speaking, that the kind of system that might be built would be subsidized by the public?
With the system that's without charging the public?
Yeah, I mean, assuming there's no road charge, that we proceed with stimulus money. I mean, public transit systems are partly called that because the public funds them, ironically, right? So what's your vision for what percentage of this whole thing is going to have to be funded by taxpayer dollars because it's not kind of self-sustaining by users?
Yeah, so if Matthew, if you take the history, we got $2.44 of federal and state for every local dollar we invested. If that's history. In this vision, we went down. We assumed we wanted to be conservative. We assumed $2. With this new stimulus, that might go up. But I believe most of this money is going to have to come from other sources other than local. But I want to remind your readers that no transportation project in the history, ever was built completely by federal and state funding. Name me a major project that was solely funded by the federal and state government. I'll tell you that will be the strangest thing I hear. In this business, it's always been you put local money on the table. Might not be the majority, but local money is there. I'll give you an example. Otay-Mesa-2. So far, we invested about $600 million in buying the property for the entry, doing all the road and the bridges. Out of that 600 million, 50% came from the federal government, 40% come from the state government, 10% came from SANDAG. But if we didn't have that 10% from SANDAG, I don't think any of that would happen. So, the majority of the money is going to come from federal state sources, but the local money has to be on the table. And that's why you see all these proposals. Now, just also, the cost of building things went up significantly. And we're not talking a small increase like inflation increase. We're talking 20, 30%. So it takes a lot to build projects, especially the kind of project that we have in this vision. But we are absolutely relying on us being as successful, if not more successful in the future, with getting other money into the region.
Those are all the questions I had. Do any board members have other issues they want to dig into? Any last thoughts then, Hasan?
Yeah, I would say,
yeah.
first of all, thank you so much for meeting with me. I do appreciate, as a resident of San Diego, reading your paper, I appreciate what you do every day. I appreciate your great in getting the story out. Here's what I wanted to get out. Yes, this vision is expensive, but it's worth the public policy to be that taking place. And yes, some of my leaders are saying, I don't want this and I don't want that. But if we didn't have that public policy debate, we would have been missing the public knowing the kind of discussion need to take place to build amazing things. And to Chris's point, we don't want the high-speed rail fiasco. We just want to build a system that actually could benefit San Diegans, regardless of where they live. This is not about just downtown San Diego or UTC. This is not just about the coastal areas. This is about the San Diego region. This is a system that I believe is flexible enough to provide everybody the benefits that we think it is. It's a data-driven system. And I wish and hope that all of us next Friday will be proud as resident of this region, that this is a vision that could really be important and good for the region.
Thank you, Hasan. I really appreciate your time today.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much.
You.
Thank you.
Thank
Good
you.
to see you. Bye-bye.
See ya.